In the massive world of rock, metal, blues, and everything in between, we often talk about who played the most iconic guitars, Slash and his Gibson Les Paul, Jimi Hendrix with his upside-down Fender Strat, Eddie Van Halen and the Frankenstrat. But stop for a second and ask yourself, how many of those famous guitar gods actually built the guitars they played? Not modified, not just tinkered with, not just endorsed, built. From scratch, with their own hands, piece by piece. As it turns out, almost none of them did. In fact, according to a recent book called A Guitar Maker's Manual by Paul Schmidt, only 3 major names in all of popular music history actually built their own guitars and played them on stage or in the studio. That's wild when you think about how connected these players are to their instruments. You'd assume more of them would try to craft their own tools of destruction, but nope. Let's explore who these 3 were, and why building your own guitar as a famous player is so incredibly rare. The case of Brian May, the Red Special. Let's start with one of the most legendary DIY success stories in all of music history. Brian May of Queen. His guitar, the Red Special, is almost as iconic as his massive curly hair. But what many people don't know is this. That red guitar with the warm singing tone wasn't bought from a shop. It wasn't made by Gibson, Fender, or anyone else. Brian May and his father built it, by hand, in their small home in the early 1960s. They didn't have access to exotic tone woods. They didn't have CNC machines or a luthier's workshop. They had an old fireplace mantle, a bit of motorcycle parts, and Brian's vision for a guitar that could sustain forever and scream like a violin. The neck? Made from 100-year-old oak pulled from that fireplace. The tremolo system? Made with a knife-edge design including a spring from a motorcycle vase, and parts from a bicycle saddlebag. He even wound the pickups himself with his dad. The whole thing was a science experiment as much as a guitar. But here's the miracle. It worked, and not just as a novelty. The Red Special became Brian May's main guitar for every single Queen show and recording for decades. From Bohemian Rhapsody to We Will Rock You, that sound, that unmistakable orchestral guitar tone, that's the Red Special, and that guitar came from his own hands. Why most guitarists don't build their own? Now let's pause here before we get to the other 2 legends. Why don't more famous players build their guitars? It might seem like an obvious choice after all. No one knows better than the player what they want from their instrument. But building a guitar is extremely difficult. It requires skills in woodworking, metalworking, electronics, design, and an obsessive level of detail. Even something as small as getting the neck angle or fret leveling wrong can ruin the whole instrument. Plus, if you're already a professional guitarist with access to the best luthiers and instrument makers in the world, why risk screwing it up? There's also the time factor. Touring, recording, writing, promoting it leaves little time to go full Bob the Builder in the garage. That's why even guys like Eddie Van Halen, who modified and heavily customized guitars, didn't really build them from raw materials. The Frankenstrat, for example, was made from factory necks and bodies he bolted together and painted himself. Genius? Yes. Builder? Not quite. So the fact that Brian May built a working, incredible guitar that became a historic part of music is almost like a rock miracle. But wait, he's not the only one. Tom Scholz. The MIT madman behind Boston. You know the band Boston. Their sound was big, layered, epic. Songs like More Than a Feeling and Peace of Mind still get blasted in arenas and classic rock stations around the world. But behind that sound was a secret weapon, not just a guitarist, but an inventor. Tom Scholz, founder and guitarist of Boston, had a master's degree from MIT in mechanical engineering. And instead of diving into the music scene straight out of college, he worked for Polaroid, designing products during the day and tinkering with music gear at night in his basement. He was obsessed with getting his tone one that didn't quite exist yet, so he built it. That included custom amps, gear, and a guitar that suited his needs. Schultz constructed a guitar from parts he selected and modified, including pickups and circuitry that let him control how the sound was shaped long before multi-effects processors were a thing. He also eventually invented the Rockman, a headphone amp that defined the sound of the 80s. That became a massive commercial success, used by bands like Rush, Def Leppard, and ZZ Top. But the real gem was his hand-built guitar that he used in the early Boston recordings. Every note on their debut album came from a guitar he customized from the ground up, just like his studio, which was filled with homemade gear. So now we've got two legends, Brian May, Tom Schultz, two players, two self-made instruments. One thing in common, they weren't just musicians, they were creators. The third guitarist, blues legend G.E. Smith. Now this third one might surprise you. G.E. Smith. He's not as much of a household name as Brian May or Tom Schultz, but you've definitely seen him. He was the band leader on Saturday Night Live in the 80s and 90s. He also toured with Bob Dylan, Roger Waters, and Hall Oates, a true guitarist's guitarist. But what makes G.E. Smith special is that he not only built his own guitars, he played them on stage for years. One of his favorites was a guitar he built using a Fender neck and a Telecaster body, but the way he configured it, wired it, and customized it made it completely unique to his style. Smith is also a huge gearhead. He didn't just settle for what was on the market. He went into the guts of the guitar electronics, tone caps, switches, and made instruments that worked exactly the way he wanted. When you watched him play on SNL, that wasn't a showroom model. That was something he helped craft for himself. And like Brian May and Tom Schultz, he didn't just build for fun, he played it live in front of millions. Honorable mentions: the Tinkerers and Modders. Okay, so Brian May, Tom Schultz, and G.E. Smith are the three famous players who built their own guitars and actually played them professionally. But what about all the others who got close? Let's give a quick shout-out to the Tinkerers, those who didn't build from scratch, but sure made guitars their own. Eddie Van Halen created the Frankenstrat from off-the-shelf parts and custom paint jobs. Prince had guitars designed specifically to his vision, like the Cloud and Cymbal guitar, but built by Luthiers. Steve Vai helped design the Ibanez Gem, but didn't physically construct it. Tony Iommi modified SGs to work with his finger injuries, but didn't build them from raw materials. All of these musicians left their mark on guitar design, but they didn't build from zero. That's what makes the original three so special. Why building guitars is the ultimate personal touch, so why does it even matter? Why should we care that Brian May or Tom Schultz built their own instruments? Because in a world of mass production and endorsement deals, there's something pure about building the very tool you use to express your soul. It's the difference between a chef cooking with store-bought sauce and one who grows their own tomatoes. Building your own guitar is about control, vision, and passion. It's about problem solving. Like Brian May figuring out how to stop feedback, or Schultz trying to layer 12 guitars on a track without losing tone. And maybe most importantly, it's about legacy. The Red Special isn't just a guitar. It's a piece of Brian May's childhood, his family, and his journey to stardom. Schultz's custom rig didn't just create a sound, it created a genre-defining tone for classic rock. These are stories of craftsmanship, and that's something that never goes out of style. What it takes to build your own guitar. If you're a guitarist and this story lit a fire under you, you might be wondering, how hard is it to build your own? The short answer, it's hard, but not impossible. Today, more resources are available than ever. There are DIY kits, YouTube tutorials, online forums, and even 3D printing for parts. But even now, it takes patience, precision, and passion. You need to understand wood types and how they affect tone, neck profiles, and fretboard radii, pickup wiring, shielding, grounding, finishing techniques, tuners, nut slots, intonation setups. It's not a weekend project unless you want a very bad-sounding instrument, but it's not just about making something that works. It's about making something that's yours. And if you get it right, maybe just maybe you'll find that sweet spot of inspiration that Brian May did in his parents' living room all those decades ago. What we learn from these. 3. So what ties these three guitarists together? It's not genre. Brian May is rock, Schultz is prog arena rock, G.E. Smith is blues country rock. It's not fame level. Some are better known than others. It's not technical ability, though all three are brilliant players. What connects them is vision. Each one had a sound in their head, a feel in their fingers, a problem that no off-the-shelf instrument could solve, and instead of asking someone else to fix it, they built the solution themselves. That's the mark of a real artist, one who doesn't wait for tools, one who makes them. In the end, most guitar heroes will always be known for how they played, not what they built. And that's okay. Some of the greatest ever, Clapton, Hendrix, Page, Beck, all used existing tools and redefined them through touch and feel. But the few who crossed that line and built their own instruments added something deeper. They didn't just change music, they changed the tools we use to make music. Brian May, Tom Schultz, G.E. Smith, three men who didn't stop at strings and frets. They picked up tools, soldering irons, planks of wood, and made history.